Poetic devices are tools that a poet uses to create a flow in the poem, to intensify a mood or feeling, or to enhance the meaning of a poem. Poetic devices are not only unique to poetry, they can be used in literature as well. They are poetic practices that enhance the meaning of the poem. They make images and symbolism stand out in the poem in order to enhance the meaning or leave a lasting effect on the reader. Poetic devices have varying functions. They can be grouped under two functions, but for the purpose of this lesson, we will look at one function which is of comparison and the second function which is as a sound device. Poets or writers in general create images with words by the help of these techniques and even more. By means of comparing things together, the reader is invited to see a deeper meaning of the text. By using sound devices, the reader can hear and see the image that the poet is trying to create. Poetry in the past and even in today's society was a performative piece of work. Hence, it is so rich of these devices because poetry tries to cater for most of the senses of human beings. These type of poetic devices that we're going to look at in this lesson, firstly looking at the ones that function as comparison, we are going to look at simile, metaphor, and personification. And poetic devices that function as sound devices, we'll be looking at alliteration, assonance, onomatopoeia, sibilance, and plosive sounds. Comparisons occur in literary works. Poets or writers use comparison to link feelings to a thing readers can understand. Other times it is to show differences or unexpected similarities between two subjects. By means of comparing and contrasting, the reader is invited to see a deeper meaning or truth in whatever the poem or text they are engaging with. So we'll be looking at poetic devices with the function of comparison. The first one we will look at is a simile. A simile is an easy way to compare two things by means of using the words like or as. The first example we'll look at is she was as crazy as a bag of cats. And the second one is life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. Sentence 1 compares the girl's craziness to a bag of cats by means of using the word as. The image puts emphasis on her craziness, how it resembles cats in a bag, which in reality can be quite a chaotic scene. The second sentence is a quote by Albert Einstein that encourages perseverance in life. The sentence is a simile because it makes use of the word like, by comparing life to like riding a bicycle. The image is very effective because to anyone who has ever ridden a bicycle knows that in order to keep moving, you have to maintain your balance, which can be challenging at some points. Yet, this directly correlates with how it can be difficult to keep moving in life. The second one we're going to look at is a metaphor. A metaphor is a poetic device in which a word or phrase makes a strong point by comparing two things you wouldn't necessarily pair together. For example, love is a battlefield. Love is a battlefield is a metaphor because it compares love to a battlefield. Unlike similes, there is no use of the word like or as in metaphors. One of the functions of poetic devices is to intensify a mood. By comparing love to a battlefield, which we often associate with fighting, victory, hardships, effort, rewards, and sacrifice. This has the essence of love and what it takes. Although love and battlefields are not always paired together, by means of this metaphor, the essence of love is emphasized. The third one we will look at is personification. Personification is a poetic device that transfers the abilities or qualities only a human can have to an object or an animal. For example, the trees danced in the wind. When it comes to personification, human attributes are taken and transferred to innate objects or animals. In the example above, the word danced is an activity that humans often partake in when there is music or in celebrations. However, here the trees are said to have danced in the wind. The movement of the trees is due to the strong wind that makes them look like they are dancing. Perhaps they are also moving rigorously. This comparison makes it seem as though the trees have emotions because they are dancing. And this is what personification does. It transfers human attributes to objects or animals. Now we move to poetic devices that function as sound devices. The first one that we will be looking at is alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of an initial consonant sound in words that are close to each other. For example, busy buzzing, the bee behaved beautifully. There's a repetition of the B sound. This is alliteration and it is effective because the line is about a bee. And with the repetition of the bee, we can almost hear the buzzing sound of the bee. Listen carefully. Busy buzzing, the bee behaved beautifully. This poetic device enhances the meaning of this line and brings the bee to life because the reader can hear the buzzing because of the alliteration of the sound of the bee sound. The second one we will look at under sound devices is assonance. Assonance is the repetition of the same or similar vowel sounds within words, phrases, or sentences. Our example comes from a poem by Kelly Roper titled The Cold Wind Blows. The poem reads, "Who knows why the cold wind blows, or where it goes, or what it knows? It only flows in passionate throes until it finally slows and settles in repose." In this poem by Kelly Roper, there is a repetition of the vowel sound O. Note that the vowel sounds are A, E, O, U. The poem is talking about the wind that blows, and the O sound is very gloomy and spooky. Therefore, it puts emphasis or imitates how the wind is blowing in the poem, and also slows down the writing in the poem. Assonance helps build the mood in a poem. Then we will look at onomatopoeia, which is a word that sounds like the noise it describes. For example, from our short poem here, fireworks, bright streaks of whiz through the sky, thunk, whoosh, brightly colored explosions sizzle and pop, pop, pop. From the above example, reading the short poem to yourself, you can hear the sound of the fireworks the poem describes. Onomatopoeia in poetry allows the reader to visualize the scene by involving the sensory of sound with words that further expands the effectiveness of the poem. And then we look at sibilance. Sibilance is a figure of speech in which a hissing sound is made within a group of words through the repetition of is sounds. For example, the sea snake slithered over the sand. From the example, it is evident that it can be considered as alliteration because of the repetition of the S. However, the repetition of an S sound is called sibilance. In this line, a snake's movement is being described, and the repetition of the S sound creates an effect where a hissing sound of the snake can be heard. Just like in our previous example, we heard the buzzing bee through the alliteration of the B. However, in this example, it is sibilance because there's a repetition of the S sound, and we can almost hear the hissing sound of the snake. And then we look at plosive sounds. Plosive sounds is an abrupt sound made by closing the mouth, then releasing a burst of breath. Plosive sounds in English are B, P, T, K, G, and D. And their effect, especially when used repeatedly, is to create a verbal reflection of events, items, or emotions which can have a harsh feel. For example, here are a few examples that I will read. B. Bush, bin, bat, ball. Push, pin, pat, pot. Tall, task, town. Dole, dawn, down. Gold, goat, goal. Cold, coat, call. And we continue and look at more poetic devices, such as the oxymoron, which is a figure of speech that combines two contradictory words with opposing meanings. For example, perfectly imperfect, a pretty ugly zombie lost her head. Then definitely maybe sweet sorrow in the end. Oxymorons are there in poetry to create drama or an interest in meaning. Looking at the example, perfect and imperfect are two contradictory terms, but together they create an interesting meaning. And according to the example above, it could mean that the zombie was perfect in her own unique way, although others might consider her imperfect. And looking at the two words, pretty ugly, one cannot be pretty and ugly at the same time. However, this statement reveals a deeper truth that the zombie is ugly, but in her own way, she is pretty. Lastly, looking at the two words, sweet sorrow, sweet is associated with things that are joyous, while sorrow is associated with sadness. The oxymoron suggests that there is something good about the zombie, and in this case, it is the fact that she is uniquely herself and at the same time sad because she has lost her head.